Hello and welcome. I am Gimba Umar. Tonight, federal government set to evacuate Nigerians that are willing to return home from South Africa following xenophobic attacks on Nigerians in that country, just as the country withdraws from the ongoing World Economic Forum on Africa. Inspector General of Police orders heavy security around embassies, foreign missions and businesses following attacks on South African-owned businesses in some parts of the country. South African businesses close shop around the country for fear of further violence by groups protesting xenophobic attacks against Nigerians. UK MPs vote to block a no-deal Brexit, most likely triggering a general elections by Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
And on business news tonight, Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation's oil trading subsidiary Duke Oil moves operations to London, from London to Dubai, to get closer to its main buyers in Asia.
On sports news tonight, Serena Williams continues the quest for her 24th Grand Slam title, prepares for semi-final clash.
And from Abuja, Buhari meets with leadership of the Nigerian Governors Forum over the security situation in the state.
Nigerians that are caught in the web of recent attacks on foreign nationals in South Africa can now return home at no expense at all. This information is coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which says that it has secured assurance from the proprietor of Peace Airlines, Chief Allen Oyema, to volunteer an aircraft to bring affected Nigerians home from Friday, September the 6th. In a statement by the ministry spokesman, Ferdinand Nwoye, the ministry is calling on Nigerians living in that country that are willing to take advantage of the special offer. Interested persons are to liaise with the Nigeria's High Commission in Pretoria and the consulate in Johannesburg for further necessary arrangements. And it does appear that the Nigerian government has had enough over the incessant attacks on Nigerians living in South Africa, and the government says that it has now drawn a red line. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Oyema, who spoke to journalists after a meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari in Abuja, was emphatic that there's no caving in this time around. He also announced that the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, will no longer be part of the ongoing World Economic Forum on Africa currently holding in South Africa.
We're going to draw a red line here, and whatever measure that needs to be taken to ensure the safety of Nigerians in South Africa, we will take. Now, we have been in touch with the South African government at the very highest level, and Mr. President has dispatched a special envoy to meet with the President of South Africa. And we have a very clear idea of what we want to achieve. And the special envoy has very clear directives from Mr. President about the commitments and guarantees that we expect from the South African government. The Vice President, as you know, was scheduled to go to South Africa tomorrow, I believe, to attend the World Economic Forum. Clearly, with this climate, he has, Mr. President and himself have agreed that he should not go to the World Economic Forum in Cape Town. And we're looking at other measures to take. Now, Mr. President is particularly distraught at the acts of vandalism that have taken place here in Nigeria in retaliation to what is happening in South Africa. Now, he believes, and the government believes, that we have to take the moral high ground on this matter. We are victims here, and we're making that position clear to the international community and to the South African government. We here in Nigeria must not fall into the temptation of also resorting to the acts that we are condemning in others.
Reactions continue to trail the alleged xenophobic attacks on Nigerians in South Africa, and this time is from the nation's capital, Abuja, where police clashed with protesters who tried to gain access into ShopRite at the Lugbe axis. The National Association of Nigerian Students also speaking up, with the president of the organization rejecting calls to negotiate with the South African authorities. Our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, reports.
Security personnel manning strategic points at the Jabi Lake Mall, which houses ShopRite and other businesses. The security is heightened following the attacks at similar stores in other parts of the country, a reprisal for the killing of Nigerians in South Africa in alleged xenophobic attacks. In another part of town, Lugbe specifically on the highway leading to the airport, protesters clashed with police as they tried to protect businesses and infrastructure with South African interests. At the South African High Commission, the envoy is having a closed-door meeting with students and youth leaders to discuss cultural exchange programs which they believe will end the killings.
There are people who went into ShopRite yesterday who were directly affected. Their brothers were unfortunately killed in South Africa. And the only way they could express their anger and retaliation was to go into ShopRite and do whatever that they did. So it is quite unfortunate as it is with what happened in South Africa.
We have come up with solutions. We are going to engage them to see ways we can meet up with our people, Nigerians in South Africa, to hear from them directly and to also hear their plights, to understand the root causes of this problem so that we can bring an end to it.
The interesting thing about this delegation is that the National Association of Nigerian Students is not represented at this meeting. Neither is the now president of the National Youth Council of Nigeria, Mr. Oladele Niyi. While Mr. Niyi sent a statement exempting himself and the organization from the negotiations with the High Commissioner, the president of the National Association of Nigerian Students, Mr. Danielson Bamidele, and other executives accost the negotiators outside the High Commission.
I'm so sorry. You are sorry.
You can't tell me you brought a student union president to discuss with an high commissioner. I mean, it does not fit into it in any way. They should start the solution with their people. The solution resides with their people. Have we killed any South African here? We cannot be moving to South Africa to go and meet with them. Ramaphosa should come here to Nigeria and appeal to Nigerians.
This unfortunate turn of events has not changed the fact that Nigerians are being killed in South Africa, or that reprisal attacks on South African businesses in Nigeria are also attacks on Nigerian businesses and jobs. Hopefully, an end to the attacks comes soon. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Staying with the attacks of Nigerians in South Africa, the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has ordered a watertight security around embassies, foreign missions, foreigners and their businesses within the country. A statement by the spokesman of the police, Mr. Frank Umba, says that the order is necessary against the backdrop of the unfortunate attack on ShopRite outlets in Lekki area of Lagos State on Tuesday, September the 3rd, 2019, by some persons suspected to be miscreants who attacked and looted the malls under the pretext of protesting against the incessant xenophobic attacks in South Africa. According to him, all zonal assistant inspector generals of police and commissioners of police across the Federation have been placed on red alert to ensure that no similar violence is replicated within the country. While condemning the attacks in its entirety, the IGP notes that the 3 police officers were seriously injured and the police operational vehicle burnt, adding that 125 suspects have been arrested in connection with the incident. There is more, and following the attacks on Nigerians, South African businesses and franchises have become targets of reprisals in Nigeria. Telecoms company MTN and ShopRite are most affected, forcing the businesses to shut down. In this report, Our correspondent Oreoluwa Shonibare looks at the situation in the affected states.
The killings of African nationals in South Africa has become too unbearable for those who cannot understand the need for violence against people legitimately seeking greener pastures. Nigeria has been hugely affected by this wave of attacks, and the federal government has repeatedly condemned the act. There was also a threat by the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, to boycott all service providers from South Africa. But with the words appearing not to have any effect and attacks continuing unabated, Nigerians back home have decided to move a step further to show how serious the issue is. In Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, an alert was issued by South African telecoms company MTN on safety concerns after reprisals for the killing of Nigerians, leading to the closure of its offices. However, the shutdown is not stopping angry Nigerians to take what they describe as their pound of flesh. In Kaduna State, but for a small group of protesters, there appears to be not much trouble around the MTN office, which is under lock and key. But make no mistake, these demonstrators have come with stem words.
Further such actions on a single Nigerian will leave us with no choice but to react in a more deadly manner that will be a shocker, not only to the South African government and people, but also to the international community.
In Imo State, ShopRite, another South African franchise located in the Owerri Mall, was targeted, with the invaders attempting to set fire to the engine room of the entire complex. Elsewhere, in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, protesters had more success, setting the MTN structures ablaze. Firefighters doused what is left following the venomous visit. Other outlets not raised suffered various degrees of damage. In Lagos State, broken windows, torn doors paint a picture of what the extent of damage done at ShopRite in Surulere. The MTN office in the area is also not spared. It can be argued that the reaction by the protesters could have been conducted without resorting to destructive extremes. But with emotions clouded by anger, the governments of Africa need to act quickly to put a stop to racism and xenophobia, two evils threatening to tear the continent apart. Oreoluwa Shonibare, Channels Television News.
Well, cultural diplomacy could just be one way to handle the xenophobic attacks against Nigerians in South Africa. That's according to the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, who says that the role of culture in the sustainable development of a country cannot be overemphasized. Mr. Mohammed shared his thoughts when he received the Director General of the National Council for Arts and Culture in his office in Abuja.
We must also use cultural diplomacy to help reduce incidences like the ongoing xenophobic attacks against Nigerians in South Africa, which has led to deaths and loss of livelihood for many of our citizens living in South Africa. I stated this much when I hosted the South African High Commissioner to Nigeria here in May 2017. So the need to deploy the soft power of cultural diplomacy in this regard is more urgent now than ever. Let me conclude by reminding us all that the role of culture in ensuring society, peace, and sustainable development, as well as strengthening international relations, was at the core of this year's World Cultural Day, which was observed on May 21st, 2019. The theme of the observance, which is Culture for Sustainable Peace and Development, says it all.
In part two, after the break, participants at the World Economic Forum Africa proffer solutions to challenges faced by African youths seeking opportunities to contribute to the continent's development. Stay with us.